What's up, Internet? You're tuning in episode 3 of FlipScreen Games' Persona 5 Royal Book Club, the monthly video game podcast where we discuss the greatest JRPG of our time, Persona 5 Royal. I'm your host, Pete and Bessie, joined, as always, by a group of picaresque dissidents of society. Mr. Chewy Plays.
I am thou.
And Patreon producer and FlipScreen Games' biggest hype man, Mr. Zaid.
Thou art I.
So, unlike the Phantom Thieves, our crew is shrunken this month. we are now a trio. But don't worry, because Sierra will be back next month. Unfortunately, I promised in episode 2 that Steve would be back for episode 3, but he's still out buying cigarettes 5 months later. So hopefully he'll come back and play catch with us in the yard at some point. But I don't know, man.
I've got a theory about this, a hypothesis, if you will.
Okay, hit me.
Clearly, Steve was Madarame, and Sierra. We just keep defeating. Who's next? You know,
who is the true Phantom Thief?
Exactly.
Yeah, who's the truest of them all?
But
we're gonna get them. We're gonna get them though. Wherever they are, we're coming.
But you know what? It's all right, because we as a trio, we're gonna hold it down. Us three musketeers here are gonna knock it out. So for episode 3, of course, we've played all the way up to the end of the third palace, and we have now exposed the unforgivable criminal mastermind, the repulsive fiend of gluttony, the evil stain on society, Junya Kaneshiro, for the scum that he is. So let's get into it. Let's jump into the episode here, boys. So I want to quickly go around the room, and we'll just kind of offer our initial thoughts of Chapter 3, as it were, of Persona 5 Royal. It's been a while, months and months, since we reunited, and for that I would love to apologize to everybody. It's been since January since we've been able to come together and talk Persona 5 Royal. So how was it for y'all jumping back into it after so long? And Zaid, I know you just kept playing, so you have had like a huge gap since you have played, so you're about to jump back in now. Chewy, I know you kind of were more paced out with it where I was. You just finished it this past week. So how was it for you coming back after such a long gap?
So I was trying to remember, because I played this section in kind of 2 parts. I did maybe a few days shortly after we recorded, right? Because I was like, finally, I can get back into this. This is great. Love it. And then I don't know what happened. Just some gaps and things, but life stuff happened. So we knew we were going to be recording a lot later than prior. And then after you gave us a date, I was like, all right, I'll just like plan around that. And yeah, maybe a couple weeks before this date, I started just digging into it again on the daily, and it was just fun. It's because I feel like I've had this experience now a couple times where I wait a little bit and then I hop back in, but like more and more I'm just like, man, this game just is easy to hop back into because it picks up right away and you kind of know the structure of it at this point, and yeah, I didn't have a hard time at all.
I really do think that's one of the game's strengths, especially if you play it the way that we're playing it, where where you're stopping is after a beat in the story, because I think like control scheme wise and obviously there's a lot of mechanics to Persona 5, so I could easily see you maybe getting a little lost in the sauce and like forgetting some of those things, episode to or chapter to chapter if you do take long breaks, but I think in terms of like coming back to it after a long gap, that's happened to me the first time I played it. I took I think a 3 or 4 month break so that I could play The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, and was kind of like, all right, I really want to finish it. Let me jump back into it. Is this going to be a struggle? And I had stopped right after a palace, and it was like that perfect, like, okay, you have that post palace, kind of like gap, right, where it's like, let's tell some story, let's do some social sim stuff, let's get you back in the swing of those mechanics, and then you're back in it by the time it's you're infiltrating the next palace. I think it's easier than most games to take a break and come back to.
There's one mechanic in particular that I do forget about with the gaps between the palaces, and it's like that focus vision thing where you can
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
because
the third eye.
the next palace I kept forgetting to use it, and you run into like the cameras or whatever, and the alarm goes off, and I'm like, dang it, I keep forgetting about this thing just to watch out while I'm walking down a hallway. So yeah,
Yeah,
but that's the only
sucks,
thing.
man. It sucks, man. I want to play so bad. I just want to play the game. But in all seriousness, it is like I think it's because it's formatted in a way where it feels just kind of like you're watching a TV show at points.
Hmm.
Each arc is it's all like the same thing that you expect to a degree, but they're all unique and distinct. So it's just like, okay, when I come back, like we're playing, when I come back, I'm entering this arc of the story. You know
Right.
what I mean? So it
Hmm.
and then like I said, like since you have free time to play with and you have like a set date on when you're supposed to finish, like the calendar, and it says fulfill your next mission before this date, um, you're able to like play like we said, you're able to plan around that. And also like because like if you finish the palace super early, like you got stuff to do and you got stuff to, you know, like fill that time with and stuff like
Dude,
that. So it is go
this
ahead, go ahead.
this was one of the like quickest I finished a palace where it was like he took he takes the Polaroid and it was like 2 days later in game. I'm like, calling cards already said I already beat this dude's ass. Like he's done.
Yeah,
He's dusted.
it's over.
we
It's
got
over.
we got a
It's
month to
over.
just chill.
I have done every palace like right away. The
Yeah.
first, basically the first day you're able to go into. With this one, I thought there was a lot more lead up into it, though. I did kind of like the more investigative approach toward like finding out who it was.
Yeah, like
Because
choosing their next target and having to kind of go do those little story beats where you're, chasing the leads and everything.
yeah, yeah, and it's fun because I felt like this one felt like, oh, now we've got our team together. Now we kind of know what our deal is. But like, they've been choosing targets. The first target was personal, directly affected them. The next target was like, all right, let's get some street cred here. Let's get some people talking about us, get us in the know. And this one was like, all right, that didn't work as well as we thought it would. We need to find somebody that the cops have really been struggling to get, you know? So yeah, no, I liked this section and just kind of the build up to the palace and doing all of those like just random little missions out around Shibuya and looking for some clues as to who it could be, you know?
Yeah, and I like that it threads in a lot of side quests like through that
Mm,
as well.
mhm.
Like that's where a lot of the mementos requests, like some of them are
Right.
connected to what's going on there, and you can.
Sierra complaining about the dark rooms and windows in chat. I ran into the same thing with the going the pitch black. Is that one? Because I kind of looked it up later. Is that one like kind of just like set to happen? Like you're supposed to run into a dark one? Because I read it was kind of random, right? Afterwards.
Yeah, it's just like a thing that
Yeah.
triggers at some point.
Okay. Um, and then they have different things that happen just randomly. Mine, it was that room. It was the pitch black room, and all of the villains were those like money gem ones that you can use for
The
fusion
So
treasure,
materials.
good.
yeah, the treasure ones.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt like I got the best one. I was like, oh, well, this is nice. I'm gonna
Yeah,
be rich when I get out of
yeah,
here.
that's a
Killing
huge
them gets
boon.
you a lot of money, and if you they're really good for like passing skills on to a specific persona that you want. Like
Hmm.
they're just like some combinations you can't get unless you have like I think it's Regent and Kamoshida's. Oh, I don't remember Madarame's, but they all have different names that
Yeah,
coincide with them. Then they're all weak to just one skill and they null everything else.
yeah. I
And
think in
they're kind of
Kaneshiro''s, I ran into Empress. That was
Empress,
the one in
yeah.
there. Yeah.
They're like, Latios and Latias in Pokemon Gen 3, where, like, they don't if you're bothering them, if you're bugging them and you don't, like, entertain them or, kill them, they'll just run away. And it's like, wow, well, now I just gotta keep grabbing items because the way to trigger them in the palace is you have to grab, like, the consumable items you can find out from, like, the unique designed thing in the palace.
Like in this one, it's
Mm.
like the piggy banks and like the all
Yeah.
that stuff. Yeah, that's like how
Yeah.
you'll trigger it if you're playing along at home and you haven't yet. Yeah, I had that this time around too. I don't think I found it in the last one, and I wasn't like hunting for it because it's like whatever, right? Like I don't get that crazy into the like persona fusions of like, oh, I need to maximize this one or that one. It's like, it's
missing
pretty,
out, dude. You're missing out.
Don't get me wrong.
I like that
it's
aspect
fun.
to it.
It is fun.
Yeah.
I'm not obsessive about it in that way because like I kind of like using personas that are not that good because it like I feel like if you game it too much, it's like, oh my god, you're like so OP. You're like some of the personas I had like in my first playthrough, I was like, dude, I'm just rolling.
Game's
over
easy.
people.
The game is easy.
Yeah.
The
So
game's
I
pretty easy.
kind of like to not go too ham on it because I want my Joker to like not be that strong,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But Chewy, I'm interested in hearing if there was anything in this section that like stood out to you, either for good or for bad in terms of like new content or new features or anything that like, really felt distinctly different than what you've seen in the game so far.
There were two things that I felt really worked for me with this section. One was just I felt like this section was like, let's throw a lot of different characters at you. So I've met what's her name? Is it Makoto?
Yes.
Yeah, so I met her, I met Akeshi, and I met just with the reporter lady.
Oh yeah.
The shogi player girl.
Oh
It
right. I
just felt like
forgot that you can meet her in this section. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because I don't know. I feel like I've been focusing more on kind of the confidant stuff and just like talking to everybody.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I imagine you can't raise everybody to level 10 in one playthrough. Like you probably have to focus on them because I'm like, I don't see
Oh, you can.
myself. You can?
You
Okay.
can. It's just like you have to be regimented about it. But it's definitely doable.
You need to like.
Well, it
Like,
seems difficult because there's even like your stats. Like you got to raise your charm and knowledge to talk to some of them. So like,
Yeah, I think the thing that ends up becoming important is like, and it's you're still early enough in the game where like you can make these choices now and work on it because like it wasn't until maybe the 4th or 5th palace where I was like, I'm gonna platinum this and I want to like do everything, and it was like, okay, like how much time do I have left to work with? And I think you really get into that min-maxing of it a little bit where you're like, okay, I have to, at any given day, the first thing I should do is look and see what confidants are available because that changes all the time, right? But like your ability to raise your stats is almost always the same. So like you figure out like, okay, the best way to raise my guts is like at Big Bang Burger. The best way to raise my charm is, and then again, like there's also like you want to make sure you're taking advantage of stuff like going to the DVD store and making sure that you have a book every time that you're on the train. Going to the bookstore, going to the library, like
every Sunday,
I got books on
smoothie
books
stand.
on books.
the
Every
smoothie
Sunday,
stand.
smoothie.
The smoothie.
Yeah, I
Every
missed
Sunday.
one Sunday smoothie stand, and I realized it right after I saved. And I was like, "Dang it!"
And like there are correct, like when you're doing the social link, the confidant, like when you're in the conversation, you have one of the events, not like the ones where you just get a point for hanging out with the character. Like when you're progressing their story, you do end up having to how do I word it? You do have to, like, there are right answers to like the 3 choices that are there, and like the musical notes represent each one. So it's like if you get 3, that means you got the max amount. And so you could like, I'm not suggesting this, but they're like you can just look it up online to choose. Okay, if I want to make sure I max this out, I'm gonna pick this one. If I want to make sure I'm gonna max this out, I'm gonna pick this one.
And like
that.
I definitely did that later on in my playthrough because I was like, oh shoot, I've already like been just playing the game like raw for a long enough time that I'm like I've made choices that were not optimal, right? So like I want to make sure I make optimal choices from now on so that I can get the max result with characters I need to or whatever. But I think you can do it without doing those things if you just think a little bit, right? And like, because a lot of times it'll give you answers that are like, oh, this is the funny answer, but it's like, okay, but the funny answer is probably not the answer that character needs for you to develop a relationship with them, right? So it's like, you just use a little bit of common sense of like, if I was actually having a conversation with a person, what would they want to hear when they're asking for my advice or when they're,
Mhm.
whatever, right? Like, and you can usually make at least, if not the optimal choice, the good enough choice that will get you some points, And like gifts are a big thing. Like, I don't know if you're doing that, Chewy, like going to the mall, there's a bunch of gift
I'm
shops
terrible at it.
and that's
I
What a bad
recently
friend.
just
What a
went
bad
and
friend.
bought tons of different gifts because I realized I didn't. I went on two kind of trips with I think with On, and I just didn't have gifts that like suited her, and then I
uh-huh.
was like, oh, I just haven't shopped is the thing.
Yeah.
So the other day I just like spent a day shopping before I did any of like the time taking activities. So
Yeah.
now I should be prepared.
That's a good thing to do. And like when on the Sunday, like where you can get the, the mail order stuff, like there's a lot of gifts that you can, I think, only get that way. But
Mm,
that's another thing that like I always try to opt for the gifts more than like the proteins or whatever, because
mhm.
they're useful, but like you don't need them as much, at least
Yeah.
in my opinion, right? I think social links and confidants are like more interesting because they unlock new content, but also they have really big advantages in a lot of numerous ways. Like, because obviously you get the new abilities, you get the persona buffs later in the game, it comes into play, like you really want to invest time growing those relationships and like getting the edge where you can. So like I would look up a gift guide. I have 5 different uh wiki guides on my phone open at all times when I'm playing Persona, and it's the classroom answers, it's the crossword puzzle answers, it's the gift guide,
Yes.
because those are things that are like it's not worth risking getting it wrong because it's free points. You want those
Yeah.
points, and it's like
Mhm.
I don't know all the answers to these obscure Japanese history questions or like high level math questions. Like I don't. Some of the English ones I'm nailing, but like
Yeah.
I have been doing the thing with those where I legitimately try by myself, but before clicking it, I'll look it
that's
up.
the right way to do it.
And I'm like, let me just see if I'm smart real quick.
And like
And sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not.
And it's like it's also worth like paying attention to things where it's like, oh, it's raining, like I should study today because I'll get 3 knowledge points if I do it the right
Yeah.
way or something like
I
that.
I have not been taking advantage of the rainy season because I just I don't know, I get distracted with the confidant stuff and things.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, you should always prioritize the confidants, but like you can study at night in LeBlanc, and like there are a lot of nights where like there isn't somebody to socialize with, right? So it's like, oh, okay,
Mhm.
like if
Or
it's
you come back
I
from the
felt like this
palace and
section there
yeah.
weren't for me.
that's true.
I
Yeah.
constantly had people to talk to just because, like I said, I felt like they threw so many
Yeah.
characters at me in this part, and I like that aspect. Um, the other character, I'm obviously what's the counselor's name again?
Dr.
Um,
Snacks, Maruki.
yeah, whenever
Dr.
I've had a
Snack.
chance to go with him, I've been doing that just because I know you all told me that's the one to max
Him,
out.
well, it's 3. It's him, it's Akechi, and it's Yoshizawa.
Kasumi.
Oh, okay. So I
Kasumi
have to do all of
Yoshizawa,
them?
yeah.
Yeah, all 3 of them
You
need
have
to
to get
be
them all to a
maxed.
minimum, yeah, like a minimum. Well, I think the minimum rank is 8, and then
Oh, you're
think
right. You're right. But that's like, yeah,
think
you,
it.
you need to get them.
You should max them out anyways, but it's like Kasumi, she only goes up to 5, so you should max her out
Mhm.
because it's easy. And then
Eh,
the other 2, I think it's rank 8 by a specific date.
It is by, yeah,
okay.
but like that date is a long time from now. So like, don't stress it. But
Okay.
literally any time that Maruki or Akechi or Kasumi are available, just go hang out with them.
Mm.
And like, if you got to look up the guide to make the right choices, do that. Cause like,
You
they,
don't want to miss because you don't want to miss out.
yeah, like
And
the amount of content you will miss out on if you don't do that is like 30 hours. It's a lot.
okay, that is a lot. The other one I prioritized a bit was Ryuji.
Of
Got him
course.
to 7, and so now Mementos is so great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The insta kill power is just great.
It's
I'm
so
like,
good.
I can fly through here now. This is awesome,
It makes
and I don't
grinding
like burn
incredible.
through my. I don't burn through all of my just
SP.
items. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
Your
SP, my
dude,
items to
SP
recover.
SP regeneration is like it is like the bread and butter to the like to everything that holds you to like every decision you make is like, all right, I got to know how much SP this takes. It's such a Like Thanos said, it's perfectly balanced as all things should be.
Yeah.
I'm working on my relationship with, oh man, I haven't gotten to talk to her in a little bit because my charm is too low. The doctor lady.
Oh,
Um,
oh my God, why can't I think of her name?
Tai Takemi.
Yeah,
yeah.
Takemi.
I've been working on my charm so I can get the cheaper SP regeneration items that she
Yeah,
sells.
she's another one that's really worth advancing because her items are like really useful.
Hmm.
There's one item that like you're gonna buy for all your party members and apply it to them. It's the SP adhesive. The one where
Yeah.
it's like an item you put on your character, like not like just something you use, not like a consumable. And every turn they get like 2 or
Does
3
it take
SP.
like the accessory slot on them?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Okay,
worth
yeah.
it. It's so worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's what I
Well,
meant to
yeah,
say.
that's
Yeah,
why I
thank
want
you.
it.
Yeah, it just like it makes the game like again, like the game's already easy, it makes it that much easier. It's great.
And it's
It's
like
fantastic.
having access to her like mid and high level healing items, like they're some of the most efficient ones in the game. Like she has like the give all party members 100 HP, give all party members 50 HP. Like that's like there are other items that can replicate those things or whatever, but some of them are limited. Some of them you can only get on certain. Like you can go to her at any time, and like it's reliable and inexpensive. And like
Hmm.
I think she's one that you definitely like is worth relying on for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing I really liked about this section was the connection that we have between Faye and her sister Makoto, right? That
Yes.
you get. Love that. I like that it's getting messy. You're starting to see like the connection of the different characters in this world, and because you start off this game, you're hitting like the middle. You're in some sort of mission, you just got caught, and now you're just replaying everything up until then. And yeah, I really appreciate that aspect of like, oh, we're getting a solid background to these people. We're seeing how they're all connected. We're seeing where the storylines are going to possibly overlap. And I just like that aspect because I'm like, now we're getting into some answers here. We're getting into like, why is this so important to some of the people chasing you? Why are you trying to avoid getting caught? And I'm like, oh, that's a pretty big reason to get caught. Literally, you're the person that you're friends with, her sister's after you.
Yeah, was that a
Yeah.
surprise to you that like both of those I guess were things I wanted to ask you. Like, were you surprised that Makoto became a member of the crew, and then were you like, oh shit, like she's her sister? Like, oh no, like
I
was that
was
like a
not surprised
reveal
about
for
the
you?
first part. I was not surprised about the first part. I'm like, I have a good idea of like who is
Yeah,
gonna be like part of the party eventually. But like her being the sister, I was like, oh, okay, this is more interesting now.
there's
Now,
some juice there.
yeah, now I see why there's a little bit more weight toward her being part of the party and everything. So yeah, and then the other thing, uh, we touched on Mementos a bit and like kind of the connections with the characters and stuff. When we go into Mementos and take those jobs and defeat some person, what I like about it is like often they are at a point where they're like they can become pretty bad, like on the levels of like your Madarames and your Kaneshiros and that sort of thing. But they're like before that, where you like get the real human aspect behind their action, and they're kind
Yeah,
of I don't know. There's just a point where they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm making these decisions because of these reasons, but I see that's wrong. It's not how I should respond to this conflict." Um, and I don't know. I feel like we're getting a lot of that with our leads as well, where they're all kind of realizing like, oh, there are a lot of outsiders. There are a lot of people who are like us and feel lost and that sort of thing. So the people they take in kind of represent that, and the people they kind of help out in Mementos, they're not only helping the people who like put in the request, but they're also helping the people that they
or victimizing.
engage with. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So. I like that aspect to it a lot, and I feel like we got to feel that a lot in this section of the game.
Yeah, I feel like the kind of ethos of the Phantom Thieves like really starts to come together in this chapter, right? Like, because like you said, I think like in the first one, there's like this very personal angle to it, right? And they don't really know what they're doing. And then the next one
Hmm.
is them like actively trying to make a choice as an organization, and like what do we stand for? What are we trying to achieve? And I think it's like here where they really like kind of their motivation gets cemented, right? Because they're like threatened with, being exposed, or the police are after them, and do we give up? Should we keep doing this? Are we safe? Whatever. And they're like, no, like, we have to do this. We have to move forward to like inspire people, and and to be able to, like, we can do this thing that no one else can do, and like we know what it's like to be the person being affected by this, right? So like, how can we turn the other way? It's like I feel like their kind of mission statement really gets kind of cemented here.
Yeah, for sure. I felt that all the way. And then I'm loving the shift of like how they're choosing their targets each time, because I like that that's unique, because now at the end of this palace you kind of get that little dropped hint where they're like, there's somebody else here doing things that you're doing, or using this world in a way similar but different. They want to actively antagonize others. And so I'm like, oh, now.
What do you
But
think
we
about
can
that?
get to that. Yeah, we.
Well,
What do I
no,
think
you
about
brought
that?
it up. Let's go for it. Yeah, we don't have to.
Okay,
What do you think about that?
I love that. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I like when you're faced with like, there's an object, I guess, and there's several different ways you can use that object. And, some can have real negative effects and some can have real positive effects. And those are real conversations that we have in our society. Gun laws, obvious example there. A lot of people have their thoughts about how they affect justice or rights, or, just human rights on a level. Like, there's a lot of harm that can come from them. uh, I'm less convinced of the good that comes from them, but there's a lot of people who feel there's a lot of good that comes from them.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, seeing their use of the what's the app called, just to go into mementos
The
and
metaverse.
the palaces, yeah, the metaverse and that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, okay, so there's somebody else who can use the metaverse, but they're using it different.
Yeah,
They're using it probably the wrong reason.
it's cool that it wants to engage in that kind of moral question of like, oh yeah, like what they're doing is kind of morally questionable. It's like the only reason it's fine is because they have pure intentions, but like, does that make it good? Like, I like that the Phantom Thieves kind of reckon with that too, where they're like, we actually don't care. Like if it is selfish or unethical to do this, we don't care if it's for the greater good. And I think that's a pretty rare stance for characters that are not like anti-heroes, right? Like they're not like bad people, they're not edgy, they're not, they're like, yeah, I mean, like, every time we do this, we might maybe kill someone, but also like they're killing people, and like we're, like, where's the line? But we can't just stand by, right? We're gonna dance over this line or dance around this line until we cross it, and
and when you put more thought into it, like, you have kind of Akechi and Sei, who are like the voices on the other side, the voice of like justice. Like, there's a process to how we achieve justice and how that should take. And they're looking at the Phantom Thieves as like more vigilantes, but then also looking at them and raising a good question, like, what if they target people who don't deserve to get targeted?
Right.
Like, who do they answer to in those situations? Who kind of captures them and stops them from making bad decisions?
Who watches The Watchmen?
Exactly.
I've watched it. I've watched it.
You should read it instead. It's
Low hanging fruit had to go. Low hanging fruit had to. I just finished the show the other day. That's why I bring it up.
Oh, it's a good show.
Also,
I'll give you that. I'm gonna send you the book though.
The rebellion that they show is kind of the theme of the game, because it takes that
the wings of rebellion, right?
It takes that be the change you want to see in the world quote and kind of does it literally. You know what I mean? Because like you guys have said, and the reason why I didn't interrupt is because you guys were killing it. But the thing that the things you guys said is that they're the only ones that can do this. They're the only people in the world that they know of. And now, plot twist at the end of the Kaneshiro boss fight, there is someone else using the metaverse navigator, but they're the only people that they can do it with. And again, like, at the end of the day, they're just kids, they're teenagers in high school. They got a lot to figure out.
Yeah, like their entire, and when you think about it, right, like as kids, right, like their entire sense of justice and morality, like it is coming from a fairly innocent worldview, right? Because it's like they're kids, but they're also kids who have all survived really serious trauma and abuse. So I think like it's that mix of like still having that like kind of pure sense of justice, but also
vulnerability,
but being worldly enough to know that the world is not a good place and that like you need people like the Phantom Thieves to stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves, right? Because otherwise they will be taken advantage of, right? Whether that's, your classmates or, this kid that you didn't know and his mother and all these other students right before or now, right? An entire city, right? Or like all these kids. And, it's just like they have to do that kind of moral, it's like weighing the heart against the feather thing, right? It's just like, like there's an argument to be made that what we're doing is unscrupulous, but like what alternative is there, right?
And I think their
it's either we do this
actions
or we do nothing.
Yeah, and I think their actions really, like, build up on the initial, I guess, forming of the Phantom Thieves, where they're doing it for a personal matter, but they came to the realization that, like, there were a lot of people suffering under, what's his name? Kamoshida,
Yeah.
right?
And a lot
There
of
are a lot
people
of
who
people
should
suffering.
be doing something about it that are just ignoring it.
And staying quiet. Like, everybody was staying quiet about it, and now they're trying to build up their force to give people the confidence to say something. Like, make it known. Make it and, their website, the Phantom Thief website, is one source of that, where people are going there and being like, "Yeah, let's give people a platform where they can say, like, they're struggling with somebody in particular, or something's happening, that they can't really address, and let's be able to address that in some
Yeah.
way." And I think that that's kind of just the major issue that we're facing with a lot of these big boss bad guy villains, right? Like, it's people who are taking advantage of others, but like everybody's just like not in a position to do anything about it, or
They're
there's a lot of
scared.
fear if they do
Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
they're
There's
scared.
the retaliation.
I mean,
Absolutely.
like in the Kamoshida arc, you guys have mentioned it. You guys have mentioned it previously, but like if you think about it, like we're told directly, like from like the perspective of the audience, that the parents know what's going on. They know that this guy is beating on children, but because he has status, and status in Japan is a very big deal.
Hmm.
At least from what I know, right? I've never been there, but like apparently, like your status of like where you work or what you've done for the country, very patriotic. Like,
I mean,
especially if like
it's true in our country too,
Yeah.
right? Like people who
yeah,
are socially powerful can get away with a lot of evil shit,
that's true.
It's just the
Yeah.
truth, anywhere.
And it just kind of like what I always appreciate about that arc the best. I know we're supposed to be talking about Kaneshiro, but just like it's so real. It's so like because this could happen, like this is something that's very realistic. You know
Absolutely.
what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Hmm.
not to say that I know personally anybody who's been through it, but like you see
Those
the
things
news
happen
once
though.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think that thread has like gone through each of our villains. Madarame, it was all about status, his art career and everything, his place in
yeah.
Japanese culture, like that was all there. And then our Kaneshiro, his is just like he didn't have that. He felt like such a need to build that for himself and build some sort of power.
Yeah.
So I think status plays a huge role throughout the entire thing. Like, whether you have it or you don't, it doesn't matter. Like, that could be twisted in ways,
And
for
then
our
also
villains
like
at least.
if you flip that back on the Phantom Thieves, again, they're kids and public perception means a lot, especially at that time in their lives. They're in high school, right? Like public perception, like what are the questions that are usually posed on the aficionado website, like when you're loading in, right? It
Hmm.
says like, are the Phantom Thieves just? It's a question that they want to know the answer to because they want that reassurance that what they're doing is like the right course of action.
Right.
Are the Phantom Thieves real? Like, do you believe in the Phantom Thieves? So it's just like all these themes and messages, they deliver them in such unique, very digestible ways. They make it
Hmm.
very easy for you to understand exactly what it is you're looking at, but it's not just they need to know that they need to know how society sees them. This villain has very high like they build it up through the world. And that's why, like you mentioned
Yeah.
it in the last episode, the world building in this game also makes it another reason why you want to jump in, even after it's been a couple of months, because it's just so it's like again, it's so unique through its writing, through
It's
its
just
storytelling.
supreme. Like it's I think it is the best built video game world in terms of like that level of immersion when you're talking about like world building and not just like talking about like lore or something like that, right? Because I think a lot of the lore of Persona is like kind of loosely defined, but like that's okay. But I think like the depth of the world, like you said, of the fact that like I'm like, oh, make sure you go to the video rental store, right? Like make sure you go do that. Make sure you go run errands, because like that's an important, engaging part of this world that is actually about you and your friends, you know, going and being superheroes, right? Like at night. It's being able to like bring all those things together into the just delicious gumbo that is Persona 5 is like, yeah, man, like you said it.
Yeah.
It's got that sauce.
I was thinking about that a lot as I was playing, because I always remember like they're in the real world buying like these toy guns, and their like imagination is basically turning them into these weapons.
This
that
is
they
one of
use
my
to
favorite
fight demons.
themes and like
Yeah.
I think I talked about this in the first episode, but it's one of my favorite themes in media is like the power of like children, and like the idea of that, like the like purity of like imagination, and you know like and like being like good, right, is like gives kids this like weird X factor. Like it's like that whole scene in the first season of Stranger Things where it's like he hits the Demigorgon with the slingshot, right? And it's like, you know, like that's such a like
Classic.
yeah, and it's such a like
That's a classic It reference right there.
yeah, right. And it gives you this sense of like visualizing that in a really tangible way, of the idea of like this could not be a more like example of like childhood, right? And how it's, you know, metaphorical for like the ability that because the Phantom Thieves are kids, they're able to wrap their head around the fact that there's another world and that they can go here and have this power and exert it in a way that matters, right? And it's like you'll get to a point in the story eventually where there are adults that become more aware of the metaverse or have to like contend with the idea that it exists, and it's like
That's happening, right? In this section with Say, right?
Yeah.
Like I have made the decision to like I think at first I was playing a little coy with her. I was like, you know, not giving her answers, but then I was like, you know what? Let's play with it. I'll tell her the truth and stuff. And just like I love how they twist her character to be like, no, that can't be true. No.
right.
You know, like she's in a very realistic place of like, that's not real. Come on, kid. Like, you're messing with me.
I love it because it's like only teenagers or only kids could be the Phantom Thieves for that reason, right? Because like I don't think it like an adult is not gonna like contend with this in an earnest way and like be able to buy into it in the way that like children just can, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
So,
also like, go ahead.
No, you go for it.
I was just gonna say, like, the power of like you guys are talking about like the power of children and how innocent they are. Like one thing that I think is like kind of crazy is we're kind of told that like, hey, this is a cognitive world. Your perception kind of defines what goes on here, right? And obviously, for the most part, the Phantom Thieves aren't just jumping into the metaverse like just willy nilly, right? Even Mementos
Yeah.
is defined as the collective unconscious of the general public. So they're going into someone's, you know, heart, quote unquote. But I also think like because they're kids and they're struggling with real world things, as we learn through their social links, they're also or they're dealing with trauma that they dealt with in the past. They're also like the reason why you're fighting shadows, the reason why there's like obviously for gameplay reasons they have to be there, but like thematically, like they're there because maybe they're just not like even like while they're doing it, they're not 100% sure of themselves, you know? Like I don't know about you guys when I was a teenager, like I wasn't the finished article, right? And I'm sure they all feel the same way. So it's like
Absolutely, yeah.
so it's cool to see that like when you get to an enemy, it's not like just this because again, like in theory, they can just perceive it's like, oh, I want this to be easy. You know what I mean? Like I just need to get to my goal and there should be nothing that can stop me. But they have to deal with it every time they go up in a battle.
And
That's why like they say
like you said, it mirrors their like emotional internal struggle, you know?
Yeah.
in like a really
Yeah.
tangible way, which is like, it's just so brilliant.
It's
So
great.
good.
It
So
makes me
good.
happy every time I'm playing it. I'm like, man, everything just comes
You're
together
just like,
so
how is
well
this
with
so
it.
good? Like, how did they just nail it? You know, like, because it's like, obviously nothing is without flaws, but it's like there's so few things I would change about it, right? Like, if I had to make an itemized list, it really it does a really good job, I think, of having that through line. And like you said, you made the point earlier, Zaid, right? Of like, it does such a good job of like communicating what its themes are without beating you over the head with it,
hmm
which
The only one that the only one that I would argue it does is take your time because it's just a loading screen. You know what I mean? Like that's a theme that you like. We've all taken breaks with this game. Like the break we just had in the past. I took a 2-year break from this game when I first played it, or the vanilla version, because I was just not in the right headspace, like life wise, right? And then as soon as I was there, I came back and it was as if I had missed nothing. Like so many times you'll start a game, get like really far into it, jump back in and think, like, what the hell am I supposed to do? I don't even know where I am right now. And it's very hard for a game to convey, like, oh yeah, this is what's happened, right? Because not every game has like a replay center where you can just watch everything again, right?
sure.
So like it does the fact that it can grab you and just put you like in the right, like give you the right context as to what's going on so you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
hmm
It's 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 absurd. It really is absurd. Like I can't think of any game, maybe a Pokemon game, because Pokemon's not like story-wise isn't like all the way there. There's not many franchises or other games that can compete with like a skill like
Yeah.
that, a part of the game
Yeah,
like
I
that.
think the fundamental gameplay is like consistent through each section, where it's like, you learn a little bit more about the world, how to engage with it, how to raise your stats kind of thing, and then you go and learn about whoever this real life baddie is, then you go into their palace and do all the same things in that little section, where and you brought up Pokemon. I'm like, yeah, you travel to the next town, you catch some Pokemon along the way, you fight the gym, then you travel to the next town, fight some things along the way. There's a structure, kind of like three little basic steps that you do, right? And I
Yeah.
think that just makes it easy to hop back in at any point where you're like, oh, I'm here in this section where I'm like, I can just walk around, do my thing, or I'm exploring that palace and
Yeah.
even stuff.
And I think it does a really good job of like drip feeding new concepts to you, right? Like we talked a little bit
hmm
earlier about with the social links and everything, right? How like it kind of will introduce characters like Oya or Mifune, right, who are the journalist and the fortune teller,
hmm
in the main
I love
story.
them.
And yeah, and like those are both really cool characters, right? And it's like it's cool though because like they give you the first appearance of them in the main story so you can't miss it, and then it's like, okay, now it's on you. Right? Like, do you want to go maintain a relationship with that person? Is that a person you even are gonna ever talk to again? Like, and I appreciate the way that it'll kind of like gradually give you a little bit more and a little bit more and fill in the tapestry so you're not super overwhelmed, but like you have a constant sense of progression and like, oh, I see how this new thing fits into a system I'm already familiar with, right? Like,
Mhm.
jumping over to like gameplay a little bit for a second, like the Showtime attacks that got introduced in this section of the
Yeah.
game, right? Like, that's a thing where it's like, hey, like, yeah, and did you need another layer to combat for the last two palaces while you're still figuring things out? Probably not. But now that you have your feet wet and you're comfortable, here's a new thing for you. Oh, here's a new thing, and
Mhm.
I love the way that it keeps those systems that you're going to engage with for 100 hours still feeling novel and fresh because there's always a little more iteration to be had.
Yeah, and I was gonna
Yeah.
mention the Showtime attacks a little bit earlier too when we were talking in terms of like just like that childlike imagination and that being able to be called into in the cognitive world, right? Just
Yeah.
because like I think I got Ryuji and Makoto's Showtime attack. I haven't gotten to use it yet. I can't wait to see what the little cutscene is for it. But the
It's funny.
lead up into it was just like what was he doing? Like watching some anime
He
or
said he
some
was
show?
playing a video game and he's like, I had
Yeah,
this
he's playing a
great
video
idea.
game. Yeah, so just like knowing that there's just like funny little inspirations for what those attacks are, and I'm like, oh yeah, how does this like take shape in the cognitive world? Because I imagine they're thinking up something and it doesn't really make sense or feel like anything they can do in their reality, you know.
Yeah.
But then it just comes together. So
that
yeah.
that scene is so funny to me, and it's one of my like favorite like little character interactions because I think it's so funny how he's like so clearly embarrassed to even bring it up, and then when she's like, "Oh
Mhm.
yeah, like we could try that," he's like, "What? Really? Oh, okay."
I always, when I watch like
So
a
funny.
sitcom or anything, something with just like a lot of different characters, I like to pay attention to like which characters haven't we seen interact too much, and like how would that take shape, you know? And I felt like this was that one where I'm like, we don't. I didn't feel like we'd see these characters together too much, but them being like my first like bonus show, my first showtime since like the first one to kind of run you through, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I didn't really imagine seeing them like talking or interacting. Like, what does this take shape as?
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
and Zaid, I'm interested to hear what you think about this because I feel like I feel like this game does a weirdly good job of that, where like a lot of games with, or like anything with an ensemble cast, like you have some characters that are paired together all the time, or like they're best friends, or they're a couple, or they're whatever, right? And like there are
Hmm.
dynamics that are like very, oh, I know what these two characters are like together. I think the game does a pretty good job of giving like most characters have a dynamic like that with every other member, or at least like more than half of the group. Like obviously Joker has a thing with everybody, right? He's the
Hmm.
leader. He's the glue friend. But like On and Morgana have a dynamic. Ryuji and On have a dynamic. Ryuji and Morgana have a dynamic, right? And it's like
Hmm.
I kind of I think it does a good job of making it feel like an actual friend group, and that like
Yeah.
they
It's like the Breakfast Club.
yeah. It's like they're there together as a group. They do things as a group, but then also it'll be like, oh, like these two characters were like hanging out together independently of the Phantom Thieves just because like it's Sunday, and like I love
Yeah.
those little beats.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, so yeah, it's cool that they brought them back in a way because these were, I mean, not to the same degree where you just get it every so often, but in Persona, the original Persona games, and Persona 2 is where like if you had your characters, you know how in Fire Emblem if you have two characters placed like
Fight
near
by
each
each other,
other,
fight next to each other.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then you'll get like like a different
Their
animation.
support.
Yeah, right?
Hmm.
Exactly. It's kinda like that. So it's cool to see that they brought him back in just a more again, another digestible, tangible way. Because like Pete said, we don't really need more to the game's already kinda easy without them, you know what I mean? So but again, it's less to do with, like, the function of them, and it's just like, "Hey, we just wanna show you, like, what your time that you're taking such good care of throughout your journey is leading you to." You know what I mean? Like because like you said, it's not just Joker, the glue guy with everybody. It's these two characters, right? Like,
Hmm.
there might be one for Yusuke and Ryuji down the line, or and this character and that character. You know what I mean? Like there are characters we haven't even seen yet, and we know that they might have something tied to this now, which is just just cool.
I was trying to remember an interaction early on with shoot, who's your kind of who who runs the coffee shop again? I always forget his name.
Sojiro.
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 Uh was did he have an interaction with Sei near the beginning?
Yeah.
Was that who it was?
She comes to the coffee shop. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was trying to remember because I was like, now we've seen Say in several different interactions with people you're connected to. Like obviously there's Joker, that connection, the interrogation, right? And then there's her relationship with her sister, and now I'm just like, oh, now there's I'm remembering Sojiro now. What
Yeah, and you're
is
like,
this? Like how is this person so tied into it without you having officially met, at this
yeah,
point in the game?
yeah, and I love at this point in the game like how many threads there are that are laid that you're like, oh yeah, like who's that person Sojiro keeps talking to the phone on, and like how does
Uh-huh.
like what size connection to all this, and it's like, and what how does like what's Morgana's backstory, like what's this, how's this work out, and
Yeah.
there's
I
so
get I got
there's so much carrot, right, for you to be like, yeah, cool, like let's keep going, where's this going?
Yeah, I got a little bit of a Morgana reveal with like Morgana remembering a bit about himself.
Yeah.
Nothing's solidified or spoken quite yet, but memories are starting to come back, and it's like, yeah, I can't wait to see what this is. Who are you?
Absolutely. So the thing you said about Sojiro takes me to I think the next point I wanna drive us towards here, but I am just gonna take a minute to remind you that this episode of the Persona 5 Royal Book Club is brought to you by our Patreon producers for the month of April. They are, of course, Arnold J. Rimmer, Christopher Lenz, Earth Visitor, Gabriel Hasselmeyer, aka Sobi, Snackago, take a dive. Or take a bow. I said take a dive like you're in a boxing match. Ty the Dude and Waka Hula. Thank you all so much for your support over on patreon.com/FlipScreenGames. You're all the realest of the real, and we greatly appreciate your support of this and all of our sister shows. If you guys want to show your support just like those fine folks did or get involved with the show, make sure you head over to flipscreen.games. That's our website where you can find links to all the places that you can get involved all over the web, including our Discord, writing in the show, all that good stuff. However you want to get involved, thanks for tuning in for another one. Thank you for your patience for our multiple month hiatus, and remember to take your time. So
I was gonna say on behalf of the patrons, you're welcome. You're welcome.
We appreciate you. We couldn't do it without you. Especially this show. We literally couldn't do this one without you, Zaid. So I want to get into it's a bit of a loaded question, and this one's more for you and me, Zaid, as players who are returning. But I'm interested to hear Chuy's take on this broader opinion from the fan base. So, for a lot of Persona fans, a lot of people I think of this part of the game as one of the weaker beats in the story, and I think it's interesting because I think we talked about how kind of before the palace, the game really slows down here. And I think it's kind of for better and for worse. I think there are some real conversations about the pace and like some of the stuff that does happen in this part of the story. And I have some takes for when we get to the palace section in a minute. But I mostly like it. Like, I a lot of these sections run real fucking long. Like, I had multiple several-hour gameplay sessions where all I did was read or watch dialogue and cutscenes and, make a couple social sim decisions. So, like, I guess I kind of get where people are coming from, but in the same breath, like, I kind of like that this is the part of the game where, like, there's a little room for it to breathe and it lets you off the leash a little bit, and it kind of starts letting you explore, like, new areas like Shinjuku and meet these new characters and, like, all that stuff we were just talking about. Like, so much of that is what makes Persona special that I'm like hesitant to levy that complaint at it, or that criticism at this section, What do you think, Zaid?
I don't. Well, it's kind of hard because, like, I think if you're comparing it to other games that do something very similar, or maybe not to the same degree, but do it, it's kind of like because you're so invested in the story and because of like the open threads it's laid out, you're kind of don't mind it. But obviously, like, at some point you're just like, I just want to play the game. I just want to move the controller and stop pressing X. My X button's stuck now, or my A button's stuck. But I think like devil's advocate, right? Because personally, like, there are times where I'm just like, even me, like my favorite game of all time, I'm just like, all right, like, I get it. Especially playing it again.
Yes.
You kind of already know you already know what's coming, so it's kind of hits home a little more. But again, devil's advocate, I would just say, like, what it does offer on the on the flip side is you're getting tremendous performances from the actors. This is like, because the game is kind of open when it gives you the controller, like when you're done with a specific task, like you finish the palace. What do you do for the next 3 weeks? Because you can kind of click through it a lot faster because it's obviously not the main thing. You get through it a lot quicker, whereas this kind of feels like a slog to get through. I just think that what it does add isn't nearly as bad as what it takes away.
Yes.
Obviously.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, it definitely, like, again, it adds runtime to the game. Like, one could look at, like, someone could argue, and I think it would be a fair argument to say, like, well, why can't they just, convey that part through through the gameplay in this way. And it's like, sure, yeah, of course. But I think the way they do it is so that you're fully focused on what's going on in that moment because it's an 150-hour game, right?
Yeah.
So like you're not like we're not going to remember that if it's not told to us in a meaningful, impactful way. And so like yeah, it kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's like I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen on this part of the because like it's kind of like a murder mystery, right? You need more. You got to keep the breadcrumbs coming.
Stories can't be all action, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Is like as a gamer, I think you want more action than not in most games because you're like, well, that's what I'm here for is to play and to. But it's like Persona is a story. It is a really deep, long story, and like there's been 2 whole chapters of rising action, right? Like this is the part where the story, like this is like where you get into the place for you to be like, okay, like so who are these characters actually, right? And like what it gives you space to feel more like you're in the world, I think, because real life is not like that, right? Like real life is not like this incredibly exciting, insane chapter is closed and now the next one starts and a crazy thing happens right away, right? The mundanity of the small moments of Persona 5, I think like that is part of why you love it the way you do. And like I think of like that section with like Yusuke's welcome party and like like they make the hot pot and they all hang out and like Sojiro meets the kids for the first time and like those like quiet, intimate character moments are like really important because I think it makes the other stuff feel like it has stakes. Like if I don't care about these characters or who they are or what they mean to each other, then why do I care if they're in trouble? Why do I care if, about any of it, right? Like at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of my biggest criticisms for many stories in many video games is that show don't tell, right? And like a game telling, oh, these characters are best friends and they love each other and blah blah. It's whatever. Whatever. I feel that Ryuji and Joker are best friends. I feel that An and Joker are best friends, and on, right? Like I like you see it, right? Like friends go out to dinner together, friends study together, friends, like go out. And
They text each other. They text each other in a group chat. They're just talking and stuff like that. It's like. You brought it up, and sorry, I don't mean to.
No, please, it's conversation. Jump in.
These are the moments. These are the moments where you really get endeared to a character, right? Like one of the first things Sojiro asks, kind of creepy in a way, but like I think if you look past the the perverted part of it, he just asks on like, "Oh, do you have a boyfriend?" Like. How do you ask someone who's in high school if they have a boyfriend
it's
or
funny.
not? You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's funny. I think when I played this game the first time, my interpretation of that was that it was creepy. But knowing Sojiro as a character and playing it the second time, I actually read it more as he was asking on like Joker's behalf of like, oh, like, is this like what's going on? Like, is he interested in this girl? Is she interested in him? Like, because afterwards, he's like, oh, she's a really nice girl. Like, you should, and it's like, it feels like a parent kind of being like, oh, like, what's going on there? Like,
and like,
and
like the whole time, like the hot pot party comes right after pretty much what happens in the Madarame section. And the first, like one of the first things Yusuke does is he asks Joker and Ryuji, he goes, well, what's your story? You already know mine. And for someone who I'm not taking shots, but someone who's a little bit socially awkward, like Yusuke is to a degree, right? He just can't really realize right? He can't really realize sometimes what he says. He can't help himself. He is making that first step to bridge the gap in that friendship, right? It's like, I want to, like, not just I need to know more about you for the sake of us working together. It's like, I want to know more about you because you saved me.
Yeah, like, we're friends.
I've opened up a part. Yeah, I've opened up a part of myself that nobody has seen before. Like, I'd like to get to know you better so we can share that bond.
And you think about it in the context of that, right? Like, he's out on his own and like they've been like, oh, like we found a place for you to stay. Like, right? Like, it's the whole like,
and the only person he was confiding in before that was his teacher
his
who just
abuser.
wronged him. You know? So like that's a hard position to be in, to be able to open up to somebody.
Yeah, and I think that's like what's so great about the Phantom Thieves relationship is like it really is like a found family thing, and like they've all lost people, or like, you know, like Ryuji's dad is gone, and like his mother and him have kind of a strained relationship because of everything that's gone on, and like An's parents aren't around, and Makoto's sister works all the time and she's alone, and
they have a rough relationship too. The moments we've seen with them together, like see very clearly she is stressed.
Yeah,
between her job and like trying to take care of her sister, like there's a lot going on in her life, and it's like hard for it's a clear strain on their relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you see the fact that like not only do they have like through the Phantom Thieves like found like a sense of purpose and like what we're doing matters, and this is we have meaning. They also like have found community, and they've found like a place where they're supported and where they feel like they belong, where in every other aspect of their life, whether that's at home, whether it's at school, whatever, right? Like they've been made to feel like they don't belong, and that like that there's something wrong with them, and like largely
that's all you're looking for as a kid. You're just looking to fit in. You're literally like that's like
you want to find your
looking
people
for your social. Exactly. You want to find your people, your social group, people that connect with you. Because, like I said this earlier, but it's a very formative time in your life. It's a very important time. Like, obviously, by the end of that time, you're not going to be the finished article. We never are, but you're going to have an idea and at least get the building blocks for what you want the rest of your life to go and how you want to be the rest of your life. So they're teaching you, like you said, they're so important because it's not only giving you more of the story, but it's kind of in a way like would this game feel like you mentioned it earlier? This game wouldn't feel nearly as interesting if they were a cast of adults. You know what I mean? Like because we can relate to them so much more than us having to go back in time and remember who we were. For me, 10 years ago. For you guys, 10, 12 years ago. I don't know.
For me and Chewy, 40 years ago.
So it's very like that's like I guess, and I'm gonna pass this to Chew because I want to get your thoughts. I'm just like for me, it's like I'm okay with it because there are a lot of games where it's just like, wow, I'm about to literally listen to this character just tell me everything that's gonna happen, and it's gonna ruin the excitement and like the reason I'm there. Whereas this is like it gives you a cutscene like this for the smallest little things. You know what I mean? And because they're so small, actually makes them feel like a bigger deal than they actually are. It's nice. But Chewy,
So
yeah.
I'm honestly surprised that that's like the consensus or general feeling toward this part.
I thought
That's
you'd
one of
feel
the
that way.
weaker ones. I mean, I feel like this part was very strong for me. I think even doing all of the kind of like murder mystery investigation stuff at the beginning, like that had me really interested. But just like having that moment, like you said, Pete, to like really see these characters' connections and everything and see how their friendships are built up and formed and all of that is the hardest work to do in any creation. It's like really nailing down who your characters are and who they are to each other. Because once you have relationships formed with them and things happen to, I don't know, I imagine like that's when you get to that real heartbreak of like, oh, what if there's a strain on these people
Yeah.
that makes them drift apart and everything. You feel that so much more if it happens. So like all of this feels like really necessary setup to me to really care and engage fully with like whatever's going to happen next. And if
Absolutely.
you leave uh I guess any just like work of art or anything feeling like you have to process something, like they've done some work to really make you think about it. And I've been trying to get into TikTok lately, and I just recently saw like just a little lecture done by the creators of South Park on writing and everything.
I've seen
And they
this.
talked about,
Yes.
yeah, they just talked about like if your actions are going like this happens and then this happens and then this happens, like that's a boring story. Like the words that should be in between all those points is this happens, therefore this happens, or but this happens. Like there has to be some sort of like triggers that either justify what happens next or like throw a wrench in what's going to happen next, you
Correct.
know?
Yeah.
Like, and this feels to me like you're building up the not necessarily like the therefore or buts, but the why we care when this whenever happens. Um, so to me, I loved it. I was like, I love seeing these characters engage. That little party with them just cooking at the top. You mentioned the on conversation. My impressions from that conversation initially were like, okay, kind of a question, from an adult. Always an awkward thing to broach
Yes.
with somebody with a minor, right? But I got the impression that that conversation might have been longer than what we saw based on what On said about it afterwards. I was like, "Oh, I feel like they talked a little bit more than we were privy to," you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's, like, a lot of stuff to read into at any point when these characters are together, and all of that is just, like, that's the work that has to be done to really solidify where you're invested in this story, you know? So I don't know. I thought it was a strong part of the game, honestly. I
I
really
thought you would
appreciate
because you
it.
love character and story, and like
Yeah.
that's the meat of the bone here, right? Is like this is probably one of the sections where the least like you know it might be the least engaging beat in the story as like a palace or whatever, I guess, but like, and we can debate that today and later on as we see more of them. Um, but yeah, I think like so much of what does get done here is what you're talking about, and that's that's the foundation, man. Like that's what
Mhm,
the whole thing is built around, the relationship and the chemistry of the Phantom Thieves, and
mhm.
like I,
The 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 interesting thing isn't what happens to a character, it's how a character responds to what happens to them.
right.
And they're similar, but it's very different. It's very different to like how you write that out. So I think, yeah, you just need to understand who these people are, and it keeps doing it. Like you said, with shoot, I just forgot artist kid's name.
Yusuke.
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 With Yusuke, like just we do know his story. Like he's very straightforward with that, and we're like, oh yeah, yeah, we do. But then we realize, oh yeah, you just kind of joined on. You don't know why Joker's there in the first place. He doesn't know um, a lot about the people he's just teamed up with, and so it's all just necessary to get them all connected and make them feel cohesive and make them feel like they matter to each other.
Yeah, and it's like some of the writing is just really good because I like how vulnerable they let the characters be with each other. Like
Mhm,
all of them are a little different too, right? Like they're vulnerable
mhm,
in different ways based on like what their personalities are like. Like Ryuji, right, is like not super comfortable with expressing himself. So like when he does like talk to Joker about like what their friendship means to him, it is like awkward and it's a little like like he doesn't know how to say what he wants to say, but he wants to
mhm,
convey that it's important, right? Whereas like you have the first social link you have with Yusuke, he makes a comment to Joker where he's like, I really appreciate you like coming in and like doing this with me because I know that I'm like kind of weird and that like a lot of people like are off put by my personality and to the point where they don't try to get to know me. And I appreciate that you are like, you
mhm,
see me, and like, thank you, and that's, I think, just also a really cool thing for a game to want to engage with of the idea of like, you know, um, I don't know, like empathy, right? And that like that
mhm,
there is that like one of the most powerful things you can do in the world is get to know someone, and like see them for who they are and let them see you for who you are. That's
mhm.
really cool.
And I
I
think, yeah, and whenever I see these types of things, like I always think of like how how difficult it is for people in real life to just show any vulnerability toward each other and that sort of thing. And just like this game just feels like overall like very comforting and like give it a chance. Like give a chance to just like really tell people like where this feeling is coming from, where you're coming from and that sort of thing because people are receptive to that. People are receptive to vulnerability. Like it's a lot to open yourself up to anybody and open your heart up to anybody. And that is always I don't know. I feel like get that out of the game at least. Like just be honest to somebody. Be honest to yourself. Like that's hard too. Like try to really pinpoint where your feelings are coming from and how to express them, and express them the way you can. Like you said, Ryuji had so much trouble with that and doesn't necessarily have the vocabulary to approach it. But like I think there's a character that there's a character in here for everybody that you could probably relate to and be like, oh yeah, that's kind of like me. How do they approach like talking to somebody in this way?
Yeah.
And
Eh,
yeah, it's fun to explore that.
I think what I love about it too is like, in a weird way, because like Joker's not a character, I kind of relate to Joker as a friend to the other characters, because I'm like that, where like I'm just generally interested in people and I like meeting different kinds of people. And like that's why he's the glue friend. Is like so many of these people would not have met or known each other or maybe even gotten along if it wasn't for the fact that like they could all relate to each other through another person that they are close to. And that like that's how they all then kind of like that's how a lot of group dynamics work, right? Is like one person starts bringing the group together, and then it's as you come together and really form a community and come to know and care for each other that those friendships are really like forged in fire. It does a really good job. So I do want to jump over to the palace, because we've not talked much about Kaneshiro like overall, and I have a lot to say about him as a character, and I think kind of some of his lack of character, right? And I think that to me is where my biggest criticisms of this chapter come through. But I think there's also an argument to be made about why that's also in some ways a good choice. So I will start with the palace itself. Chuy, I'm interested to hear kind of what was your thought of the third palace, and take that where you want. I mean, I like the imagery of the flying bank, the atmosphere of it, the puzzles, the gameplay, some of that nuance. Like, what stood out to you about this palace when you compare it to one or two?
The circle, the lock,
Yeah.
that room in general. I thought that was like kind of the most. I think it was a bit. It might have been the strongest like palace cognitive representation of what Kaneshiro was going for out of the other two. To me, I guess the other two, Madarame's wasn't so straightforward in a way. It was very like avant-garde. What's the word?
Kind of abstract.
I'm looking for. Yeah, very abstract type of palace, which fit for it. But yeah, this one, the lock itself, just going through those rooms, circles, and moving it like you're a key, getting through to the center so you can finally unlock the door and get to the treasure, right? I was like, oh yeah, this feels like it just fits the theme. Like this is the most thief-like mission they've been on to me up until this point, where it was just like, oh, it's actually built like a little bit of a bank heist in a way. So I like that aspect to it. Like you said, I'd say definitely more straightforward, but I do think it was interesting doing the lead up into actually finding the palace, just because I like that investigative approach to it. I liked that there wasn't really anything known about this target. It was a bit elusive kind of thing. And maybe, that feeds into the lack of character that we had with it. And they kind of fed us that character in a different way, where each step you took closer into the lock, it was like revealing of kind of like his inner desires, right? And ultimately, and not the deepest of them, because I think there was a little bit less of a build around this character, because he was mostly disconnected from all of them. Um,
Yeah.
Kamishita, very very connected to their lives. Madarame, very connected to one specific person in that life. In this one, it was a little bit more like there were more separation from the connection. I think the most connected person in this one was Makoto, right? With her sister actually
And even that, it's like
leading.
it's kind of tenuous,
Yeah, it was just a
It's
weaker
just there.
connection
It's just
overall. It
there.
wasn't as direct,
Yeah, it's like, oh, she's
I think,
investigating him. It's like, well, yeah, she's a cop. She's investigating a lot
yeah.
of shit. She's also investigating us, right? Like, okay.
Yeah, they've got a lot of things to investigate, right? So yeah, this one, it felt like there's not that direct connection here. The direct connection is not even very directly connected. So yeah, overall, I think that's where the weakness in that palace fell. But I, I think it had time to do. I think the focus of this section was just like other things rather than the palace itself.
Yeah, and that was what I was kind of getting at when I said I see the benefit of him as a story beat, right? Like I think
Mhm.
he's kind of a device more than he is a character, right? And like it kind of reminds me of I remember when the original Avengers movie came out, there was like some commentary around like, oh, like Loki's the villain again. We already met him. Like, why are we doing that? Why don't we do something new? And I'm like, well, because this movie isn't really about that. It's like, like this part of the story is not about the palace and the guy we're fighting. It's about the team coalescing. It's about the growth of them as an organization and like and them coming into their own as like investigators and like having more of an attack plan and Makoto coming in and like being like, you guys don't have plans, you just do stuff. Like what are you doing? It's like that's really what this is about. It's not about Kaneshiro, whereas like the first two palaces are very much about the villain and how they relate to our characters, right? And
Yeah, and in one way, like this palace was more important to the characters in the way of like they're establishing themselves as just in this world.
Yeah.
Because that's the overall fear that Zaid just brought up earlier. Like, are the Phantom Thieves just? Are they picking villainous people to steal their hearts, or are they just could they steal my heart even though I'm like perfectly fine? Um, so I think that was more the point of this mission. It was to show people like we are aware of these struggles that maybe these high school students are getting targeted into just selling drugs off somewhere, running drugs off wherever. We're aware of that. We're aware that the police are having trouble locating this person. Let's give them a hand and show the people like we are paying attention to crime that needs to be addressed. So, yeah, I don't know. I think this was a mission that was more for the team and their build up more so than like the actual connection to the villain was.
Sure. What do you think, Zaid?
I mean, to kind of just echo what you guys have been saying, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't go as far to say it's like a bad part in the game. I think if like this is your bottom floor, just hypothetically, because obviously we know what happens, but not everybody who's playing and Chewy doesn't know. But we don't know if this is the bottom, right? Like we don't know if this is as
Yeah.
worse as it gets. Is this really that bad comparatively speaking? Like I did this when we did it on Loot Pots, Pete, the first spoiler cast we ever did. If you compare anything, a character or story beat, a song, arguably, to another video game, Persona 5 specifically kind of just stands out. It's kind of just like, you know what I mean? But it's when you start looking at it within the vacuum of the video game in itself, and that's where the cracks, quote unquote, start to show.
And it's just like what I feel like it's such an exercise in futility. It's just like, oh, like what's the worst part of the best meal I've ever had? It's like, who cares? Like it was all good. Like, it's
It was the fork.
Like,
I accidentally bit the fork.
Like I'll give you an example. Like this is obviously an anime game inspired a lot by anime. You look at some of the most iconic characters in anime, like Naruto, Luffy from One Piece. Like, sure, we love the super hype moments that, when they say their special move and they kill the bad guy or they defeat the bad guy, but we don't support or cheer for those guys because they say believe it or gum gum and then whatever.
right.
You know what I mean? We support them because we know who they are. Like we've seen them at their highest and their lowest points. And like, not to say any of that happens in this section, but it's like you mentioned with the Avengers. It's a meaningful part of the meaningful character interaction that you're getting, right? Like I used to always kind of look down on this and kind of look down on Makoto a little bit, but Makoto is
I changed your mind, I know.
Yeah, exactly. Makoto is a character her struggle with herself is that she feels like she's just the world is passing her by and nobody needs her. And that like we all feel like that at some point, you know what I mean? Whether it's the family, friends, like you want to be there for the people you care about and she feels like she can't be. And sure it's a little over the top, but maybe she just needed a mustache twirling bad guy rather than that personal connection to show that yeah, cuz like honestly, like I'm trying to think about it. Who could you like reasonably give her? Like
That's
the principal maybe?
that's
Like
the
it's not
thing,
even
right?
that.
And I guess you could, but it's like I think the thing you're right. And honestly, I've never thought about this before, but I think you just made something click for me where like he needs to be this kind of villain because the thing that she's overcoming is not external, it's internal. Right? Like
Hmm.
and obviously like we said, all the Phantom Thieves are dealing with an internal struggle. But Makoto's struggle is different than everybody else's in that like it's not something that's been inflicted on her necessarily. Like it's kind of everyone. It's her whole life. It's every person. It's society. It's expectations. And it's like her feeling like she's not enough. And all the Phantom Thieves have dealt with that level of like, inadequacy or whatever, but it's more because somebody else like put them there and made them feel small, where like Makoto's the one making herself feel small, you know?
Hmm.
She's the one who can't see her own value. And it's when she joins the Phantom Thieves and like finally stands up for herself. And again, right, because she found a place where she belonged and where she was supported and had community. So she could take that step for herself where she becomes a totally different person, right? Like, I pulled quotes for several characters that I thought were interesting, right? And like she has a line where she says, "The old me is dead, Makoto the sycophant is gone, and the corrupt adults who controlled her are next," right? And it's like that's such a face turn from the character that she's presented as a minor antagonist up until that point, right? Like all of her actions are dictated by other people. All of her choices and morals are being decided for her by her sister, by Principal Kabayakawa, by the other students who are judging her, right? And it's not
Hmm.
until she's able to step outside of that and acknowledge that, like, you know, I am good enough and I do have value, and it's like I need to be the one to, craft my own narrative, not let other people do it for me, And I think like
Yeah.
to me that's what makes her such a compelling character, because I think she's the most relatable broadly of any of them, because I think everybody struggles with that feeling of inadequacy and being like I'm not enough, and
Yeah.
other people make me feel small, whatever, right? And then like you have to find your power for yourself, and like that's her whole bag, you know?
Hmm.
And then
I
at the
think.
end of the scene, at the end of the section, this is why I specifically said July 9th for this one, because when she's watching the newscast of principal Junya Kaneshiro has been arrested. He turned himself in this morning. And then her sister comes in and she's like, I can't believe this. And she starts instead of it being, I need my sister to worry about me and focus on me, it's I'm worried for my sister. Don't worry, sis. I finally found where I belong. You know what I mean? It
Hmm.
goes back to what like kind of the whole theme of the Phantom Thieves and just kind of acceptance and the theme of finding your social group, your people. You know what I mean? It's just
Hmm.
stuff like that. It's little like one-liners like that that really stick with you. And I think that's what makes her such a again compelling character is because she feels so real. She feels like someone you could actually know in the real world. Not to say
Hmm.
the other Phantom Thieves don't, but like those little moments really make her stand out. And that's what the journey was about. Not who she was fighting, but what she was fighting.
Exactly.
I,
Yeah.
I
Well
think
said. Well
you.
said.
Yeah, and I think you both like really connected the dots for me too. And I think Kaneshiro and Makoto, they're parallels to me. And they kind of comment on that when they're facing Kaneshiro in that fight. They kind of say, they recognize that he's an outsider, and he did what he thought he had to do to get like find his place in the world, find some recognition, and then Makoto's there. She's doing the same thing, but just like it's not coalesced into just like evil acts upon others,
Yeah, his is like the twisted mirror version, right? It's like
Mhm.
I feel weak and I've been made to feel weak by other people, and the way that I'm going to feel powerful is by perpetuating the cycle of abuse, right? Whereas like Makoto's answer to that is I'm going to stand up for myself and others. And that's how
Mhm.
I'm going to feel powerful is I'm going to stand for something,
And
right?
draw from her own power too, like Kaneshiro's just came from a place of like really feeling insignificant and feeling like the only way to that was to make himself a force for people or against people,
Yeah.
really. So,
Exactly.
And then
yeah,
that's a good way because right, hers is the opposite. She's going to be a force for people, right? And
and herself,
that
yeah.
starts here with the Phantom Thieves and helping them escape, right? And then turn it around and come back and win. But also then again, right? Like everybody, right? And that's what the Phantom Thieves are about, right? And it's like, okay, cool. Like I'm lockstep in this. Like this is what I was looking for. It was like her whole goal was to help people, but she's spinning her tires, right? And it's like it's by taking control of the narrative that she's able to grow into the person that she needs to be to actually do the things she wants to do,
Hmm.
Just coming at it from like a gameplay for the Palace and Kaneshiro. Kaneshiro's boss fight's kind of easy. Like I think it's a lot
Yes.
easier than the first two.
It is a lot easier.
Specifically because this is your third go around. You have an idea. There's going to be some unique gimmick to the boss that you're going to have to deal with. And he just keeps summoning the two bodyguards. I ended up using
Keeps
on
paying the two
yeah.
bodyguards.
I used on, I want to say Yusuke, Makoto, and Joker was my team that I went in with. And if it wasn't Yusuke, it was Morgana. It was one of those two. And the
Mine,
strategy I found, go ahead.
I was gonna say I had on Ryuji and Makoto. That was my
Yeah.
lineup there.
I think
Yeah.
mine was Makoto, Yusuke, Joker, and I want to say I had Morgana. It might have been on, but I think it was Morgana.
Luckily, On has like a broken skill for this fight. If you use the Dormina to put him to sleep, you put the bodyguards to sleep so they can't attack, and he can't really do that much. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So
I think I
it kind of
had Joker with that ability. So
Dude, I tried to put them to sleep like twice and it failed 2 times in a row and I was like,
Me
fuck it. I'm just
too.
going to attack them. I'm just going to attack them all out. I'm done.
mine did it, but I am stubborn, so I was just like, no.
I'm the same way. I'm with Chewy. It's like
You will
I'm gonna
fall
keep
asleep.
using Hyper Beam until there's no opportunities for me to use it anymore, and then I will charge the next round.
I just straight up bodied both of the bodyguards and then I killed him before he could resummon them and got to the next phase of the battle. I was like, forget it. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. So I think an overall dungeon. I think just to tie like one section with another, the theme for the first half of the Palace is arguably one of the best songs in the entire game.
That track slaps, dude. I wrote that in my notes as well. I was like, this might be my favorite Palace theme. Like, this is such a good track.
You never think about it because you get to the Kaneshiro part if you're revisiting and you're like, oh, like, okay, this is like the roll your eyes because you've already done this before. But I remember getting into it, and I was on a video couple months ago with my buddy, that Nintendo quality, and he was playing the game, and I was just helping him out and stuff like that. And he got to that point, I'm like, dude, this song slaps for no reason. I was just kept bobbing my head. I have it on my Spotify playlist. It's so like one thing that I think this game really, really does that I think music's very important to a game. The sound is almost as important as what you're doing because, like, we mentioned it, or Sierra mentioned it last time, and you mentioned it too, Pete. Like the first section of Mementos, that song is like very uncomfortable. It's very good at making you feel uncomfortable, and I think the music in Persona 5, at least for the Palace theme specifically, it really feels like you're watching kind of like a spy thriller movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it feels
and
like
the
a
music
heist, you know?
Yeah, a heist, perfect. You know what I mean? And it's that, like, it just adds to what you're doing. It makes you like there are a lot of people who will play a game and just go through the straight line to get to the end rather than explore like all of the dungeon design. Like one of the best changes from vanilla to royal is adding in the will seeds because it gives you something else to look for, which in turn lets you see the rest of the palace. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you? Good. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Can I tell you my favorite feature about this palace is I love how every time it's like, hey, you have to backtrack. It's like, do you want to just go there? you want us to just take you where you were?
Yeah.
It's like, fucking thank you. Yes, I do. Because, like, Jesus Christ, it's so annoying to be like, oh, it's 4 floors away. Let me run up 4 flights of fucking stairs. Like,
Yeah.
because, like, the bank is very, like, well laid out. It's easy to navigate, but it's kind of sprawling. And I love that it's just like, yeah, you could just, you already looked at everything.
Yeah.
You got all the will seeds. All right, cool. Let me just take you here to there. Because it's like, otherwise, it's like, I don't want to grind the entire time, so I'm going to be so OP. I already beat his ass, no problem. When I get to the boss fight, I don't want to be too powerful, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I really like this palace, despite the fact that he is not a very memorable villain.
Yeah, he has to be the Frieza. He has to be Frieza. He's got to be, you know, like the mustache twirling villain to get to the larger point of the game's themes, and honestly, kind of for the gameplay a little bit. Like, I think because he's kind of like a dud, they were able to really expand, like the lock being the way you enter the treasure, and you have to manipulate the entire palace. One of my favorite rooms in this palace is the money room, because it's just you don't even know context to what you're doing. You already know that the person's heart that you're in, this guy's greedy as shit. Like, that is a perfect show don't tell moment. Like, I don't need to know he's greedy, because he literally thinks in his own heart that his money is just rains. It's literally raining down. So,
and they kind of they have fun with the tell part of it too, where they're like, here's this combination. It's just this word, rich. Just all his thoughts are consumed by riches, money, wealth, all of that. So I think they poke fun at the tell part and do it in a good way.
That part is literally the only thing gameplay-wise I don't like. I don't love the missing pages mechanic, because, like,
I think write it all down.
Yeah, exactly. But
I like that part of it, honestly.
I think the thing that bothers me is, like, it feels like a very weak gameplay choice to be like, yeah, we'll make you do an algebra problem. Open up the journal if you can't remember the code we gave you. It's like, can I get, like, a puzzle? Like, can this be a puzzle or not? You know, it's like, either have me fight a guy and get the code and move on, or, like, make me actually do something. But the idea of being like, open this up and then solve an extremely basic math problem, I cheat every time. I literally Googled, what's the list? I'm not remembering this. Fuck that. Like, I did it. Yeah, I know that, like, 2 + 6 + 4 is 14 or whatever. I got it. Okay. You know, it's like,
I opened
do
up my
something.
phone.
Make it a game.
I opened up my phone and I wrote them down, because I like those. I like little math puzzles.
I appreciate that you actually did it, because I'm like like, even the first time I played, I was like, fuck that, I'm not doing that shit. I was so cynical about it.
I saw it and I was immediately like, cool, I like this.
Like, all right, baby.
I will say
this might just be for me.
One thing I will say though, it is very, like, old school. Like, you remember when you would have, like, a combo,
for
like,
sure.
Like, you know, like, you know what I mean? That's what I like about it. The first time I actually did it, the second time I'm like, I don't got time for this. You know, I got a life to get back to.
It's like, I'm already playing a 100-hour plus game a second time. I'm not doing this fucking math problem.
Exactly. Contextually though,
I
it
hit
fits,
50
like, the
hours,
combos.
by the way.
I'm close. I'm very close.
I think I crossed 40. I don't think,
I'm definitely in the 40-hour mark.
Or maybe I'm at like 38, 39, but I'm like right there, yeah.
Yep, I hit 50. It takes me longer to play RPGs than everybody else.
You really do take your time. You do.
He took it literally. He took the theme literally.
He really did.
I do.
Chew's got to get that tattooed. I think one of the funniest things to me about Kaneshiro too is, like, I feel like the game fully acknowledges that he is not as well developed a villain, because there's literally a line, like, after you secure the thing to the treasure, where Ryuji's like, in the end, that Kaneshiro bastard only showed his face once, and I'm like, yeah, you see this motherfucker 3 times in the entire game. Like, it's like, it's such a small beat in the grand scheme of things. It's like, this is like a weekend for the Phantom Thieves. They're like, yeah, whatever, we took out the mafia. Like, it's such a low effort task for them.
Yeah, and it's funny because at the end, it doesn't, like, usually, like, the villain will have, like, the music will start playing. There's, like, that song that you play in Mementos when you finish, like, one of your targets.
Yeah.
And it plays that song for, like, the epilogue of that fight. And it starts that music and they start talking and, like, yeah, I do feel bad. I'm gonna go back to my former self. he just relays information. He's just like, what about the guy in the black mask? Aren't you worried about him? And then that's when that plot, that thread starts unraveling. And you're just like, oh, there is someone else. So he really is just meant there to give them someone that is kind of in a way powerful, quote unquote, to just have them overcome something while they're growing, while they're continuing their growth.
Yeah.
And I could see it for both sides. Like I could see a way where you take them out and you still have that stuff, but also like the gameplay in there was good. Like it was very, very fun. It was engaging. It was interesting. That's more
Mhm.
than you can say for a lot of other RPGs, let alone video games in general.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think we're almost at the end here. I guess we're that's what I'm seeing here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're definitely we're getting to the wind down. I think, I think the only other thing I wanted to touch on before we get out of here is really kind of, I guess where things go from here. And obviously that is not a question that Zaid nor I will engage with for all of you first-time players. But for you, Chuy, I'm interested in kind of, I guess, picking your brain of like where your head is at in terms of the narrative right now of like, we've talked about all these threads, right? There's this thread of, the police investigation with Sai and Akechi. There's this other metaverse user and the connection to the mental shutdowns and some of the stuff that like we really haven't engaged. Like the story told us about this stuff up front, and it's kind of just been brewing in the background. And Morgana's future, like all or past, I guess I should say, all that stuff. Like, what are the biggest questions you have as a player right now, and what are you kind of hoping? What blanks are you hoping will get filled in chapter 4?
So I felt like this section, more so than the other two, really reminded me that we're leading up to kind of this midpoint in the game. I don't know how many missions away we are from this one where we actually get caught, right? But I think I feel like we're closer, a lot closer now. Um, I do know some things because I finished up what is it, July 9th, and I think a lot of kind of story and dialogue and stuff plays out right after that section, right after you finish that day. So I think technically I've done like July 10th, just based on all the things that you kind of get directly after that day, right? Um, so I guess, can I say it? I kind of know where they're leading into.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah,
I
I
would
mean,
assume. Yeah, go ahead.
so
yeah.
it just got revealed that from Say in an interrogation that now you are a target. Like the Phantom Thieves themselves are a target.
Bum bum bum.
And I was like, sweet, awesome, cool, perfect way to do it. Like it was a matter of time, before people, because the villains got to catch on at some point, and they're like, all right, these people are getting in our way now. They're actively ruining our plans. We've got to get rid of them somehow. Find out who they are. Use that method. I don't necessarily know if the group targeting us is uh, the aforementioned person who can use the metaverse, or if it's like a separate organization. Because there's several options, like obviously the police are after you. It could be the criminal organization. It could be the other people using the metaverse who might be connected to the criminal organization or not. Not confirmed yet. So I don't know. I got a lot of questions.
And there's
for
like
sure.
there's kind
There's
of
a lot of
that
different ways to take it.
there's kind of that bit of it's like, I don't know. I want to say it's like a clue, but it's not really. It's like, it's kind of like it's like trying to ask you, the player, the question. I think if you think this of like that SIU director who we know is Sai's boss, it's like, okay, he keeps talking to people that are not the police, right? So it's like, what's up with that, right? Like, is he involved? Is he what is his connection? Are all the bad guys the same? Are there multiple factions? It's
The principal keeps talking to somebody on the phone, who,
right, it's
he's
like
been sus from the beginning.
it's like how but it's like who though, right? Like who's he
Who?
connected to? Like,
Uh-huh.
and
Yeah.
are all these people's interests the same or not or what? And
Mhm.
yeah, there's quite a bit of intrigue there, and I like the way that they're like, hey, you want to know, right? Well, next time on Dragon Ball
Keep
Z, baby.
keep playing.
Time on Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think there's just a lot that's built up. And then there's even like some mysteries behind what's her face, who's the journalist, right?
Yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah.
I don't know much about her outside of like she used to be in politics, I guess, but something happened and she's not anymore, got moved over to like entertainment and culture, and the Phantom Thieves are the only thing that kind of connects her to the slightly political world at this moment. So I'm like, what was she investigating? Who did she get too close to?
Yep.
Like there's some other power structures here that we're starting to touch on, and I'm like, this is cool.
I
I like
love
the layers.
that you're starting to get to get into more of the stuff of the characters that aren't the main characters and kind of like, oh yeah,
hmm
like how does this all connect? And because
This is why I like this section. I was like,
yeah,
there's a lot going on here that at least I feel I can see is going somewhere. But
yeah, absolutely, I
yeah.
totally agree. I
Yeah,
feel
it's
like
definitely.
go ahead, Dave.
I was gonna say it's definitely a very good, like, it's definitely a good section of the game to slow things down and kind of again open up more of those threads, slowly unravel things to you organically, because none of it feels forced in. That's every confidant, every social link. You will at some point in the game see them at least once. The game will make it a point to do that, but
hmm
it never feels unorganic. It feels like something that you've been building to. You know what I mean? And that's where the section is going. This is like one of my favorite sections of the game. Arguably, personally, might be my favorite section of the game coming
Yeah.
up. What we're about to do. You know what I mean? I'm very,
Awesome.
very excited for what's coming.
It's pretty good.
But just picking up where Chuy's talking about Oya. I mean, just before we wrap up, I did see on the notes, and one thing I wanted to mention is how we all feeling about Goro Akechi at this moment in time, because he's no longer just a guy in the Persona universe. He
Yeah,
seems like he's getting more involved.
I
So
I did want to hear what you thought about him, Chewy, because yeah, like the first we met him like once before this, but like this is where you get to actually like have a conversation with him and play off him a little bit, and
hmm
he's a very interesting character. I think Zaid and I exist on the two spectrums of how you can like this character, where it's like Zaid's like, oh, he loves all those kinds of assholes. He likes Bakugo and Vegeta and all the
yes,
like heel asshole characters, and I am like, I love to hate this guy because I fucking hate him, but he's a great foil for the group and he's a good rival for Joker. And it's like, he's
hmm
not a dude I'd want to hang out with, but like they have some good moments.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like he's just Joker on the other side of this. Like, to me, that's the impression I got from this
Yeah,
character, where I was like, oh yeah, they're both smart kids. They're both like thinking about their place in the world and how kind of the adults operate and that sort of thing. And he's just in a position where he can approach this in a more respected way. He wasn't like wrongfully accused for anything and has to, so I don't know. I see them a lot like parallel characters doing similar things, but like obviously have to take different approaches toward it based on their resources and where they are. So,
sure.
um, yeah, I mean, I haven't had too many conversations with him, just a couple. I know he's busy all the time, and I know he's just like, celebrity status. People recognize him on the street, can't really do normal life, and that's a difference too, where Joker is very like anonymous in this world, can kind of go by and see things from a secret perspective, and Akechi's just he doesn't have that luxury.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
So,
point. Yeah,
so yeah, thus far, don't mind him. Haven't really found any reason to hate him, but I do like the conversations between them because the initial one's at the TV station, and you're on two opposing sides here. Where you're obviously we're Team Phantom Thieves here, and he's not. So yeah, you just got to talk to him about that.
I'm interested to ask you more about him after the next chapter.
Yeah,
We'll get another
I
update
can't
there.
wait.
And
All
then
right. Oh, go ahead, Zaid. Go ahead.
I was gonna say one last thing, because I know a lot of people who are watching like this section, because this is kind of where we differentiate as players, like how we spent our time. And I know we're running super long anyways, but just summarize, like, were you able to max out any of your confidants, your social links? Were you able to meet
Not
anyone
yet.
new you meet anyone new? Did you just kind of like was there a particular like event that you had with a character that like really resonated with you?
I met a lot of new people. I think the one that's been kind of fun to explore is it Hifumi, the shogi
Yes.
player. That one I've been playing just because I don't know some of the powers she gave through the confidant thing. I was like, oh, that's pretty interesting. That seems like a cool thing to pull out in battle. So, but yeah, just like it seems I was interested in it mostly because it feels more disconnected from the rest of them. So I was like, I
Yeah.
kind of want to explore this and see if it like gets roped in a little bit more, you know? So,
She's a little bit more on the outskirts. And I think
mhm.
she's the character you've met so far that's like the most removed from everything. I guess except for the politician, but I've never been friends with him. I have no interest in doing that.
Oh yeah. I
Wow,
keep
dude!
forgetting. I keep forgetting to work at my night job. I've taken several jobs and have done
I don't
none
do
of
jobs.
them.
I'm like, dude, my guy is independently wealthy. Why the fuck would he have a part-time job?
I go to the list and I go through the process of doing the phone call interview thing,
That's
and
so
then I
funny.
just never show up.
I've never done any of those. I'm just like, absolutely not.
I
In
barely work
no.
at the coffee shop I live in.
Yeah, it's like, dude, I already have 2 jobs and I go to
The
school. Fuck that.
I literally learned like maybe in this rotation that you could, if you went to like the bathroom, you could like help clean the store and your kindness goes up. Did not know
That's a
that
really good one.
until
That's a good one.
I did not know that until this
You
section,
can
and I
also
was like,
check how
wait,
your stats are advancing there if you didn't know. Like if you sit in the bathroom, it'll
oh,
tell you. I think I'm almost about to up my knowledge. I'm almost about to up my guts, and you can check, and it won't tell you
oh.
exactly where you are, but it gives you an idea.
I was wondering about that because I was like, I don't know how close I am to this. I just know I'm going for my charm right now, and that was another benefit of hanging out with Uya, who after every one, it's like, oh, your charm went up a little bit. I'm like, sweet, I get a little confidant thing, I get some charm points. Great relationship to push, you know.
The
So
bathhouse will also up your charm if you don't know that. That's an easy way to up your
yeah,
charm.
I've been doing it on the rainy days too, and it also does your guts,
Yep.
so you get that extra point.
There you go. You're doing it. You're doing the thing. You're min
I-
maxing.
I'm lear- I'm learning little things here and there, and listening to the advice on the street. You know.
What about you, Pete? Have you been doing anything particularly fun or wild with your friends?
Yeah, I think most of my time has been just like in the confidant stuff, and like building out those relationships. And I like to kind of maximize the ones that are already started because like you get those benefits, right? So like I'm as far advanced as I can be with every member of the Phantom Thieves right now, and I'm forgetting her name again, but the doctor and
Kenny.
Takemi.
Takemi, right? And Sojiro and like
Yes,
all
girl.
all those characters I generally prioritize earlier on because like I want those benefits, but also it's like feels narratively like it makes sense to me that like yeah, we're best friends. Of course I'm hanging out with Ryuji whenever he wants to hang out. I'm hanging out with Yusuke
Yeah.
whenever he wants to hang. Like these are my buds, right? Like
Fun fact:
I'm going to the diner with On. I'm going and getting, going to the buffet, all that kind of stuff.
I
Um
realized I hadn't done my initial confidant thing with Yusuke like kind of late into the month because I was like, oh, there wasn't really like there wasn't just like a clear point where I had to hang out with him, and I was like, you know what? I don't think I've hung out with Yusuke at all. Let's go see what he's up to. So that was a new one for me too in this section.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like his confidant a lot.
yeah, he's a lot of fun. I gotta say, so this is I'm like very close to ranking 3 out of the 20 something confidants in the game to max. I spent a lot of time with On. This is like a big On section for me. She gives out good abilities. Her story is great. She's great.
I
She's
really like
fantastic.
her relationship with Joker. You know, like I like their dynamic as friends. You know.
Mhm.
One of the few characters that plays like the, hot character, but just kind of written to just be a person rather than, oh yeah, I am the super good looking person, so I'm gonna, you know?
This is something I wanted to say earlier. Something I really like about this game is the way that it will engage with tropes and then like circumvent them in that way, right? Like Akechi makes a comment about Makoto being this like, you know, good girl who just like does whatever she's told, right? And then it's like her whole character arc is overcoming that, right? And it's like I like how with On, it's like the other characters like will treat her that way, right? Or like make judgments about her or whatever because of her looks, and that it's like, you know, you as the person that actually knows her gets to know, you know, like who she is and what she stands for and what's important to her. And yeah, they do a good job of like not letting those characters be one dimensional or feel like the tropes that they clearly are like based on and like trying to, you know, use as shorthand to then have character growth. It's really smart. You know, it's a good use of the fact that like Japanese media is filled with recognizable tropes. You know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm close with Ryuji. The one that I really prioritize though is because game breaking ability that comes up. And I won't spoil it for everybody else so they can hopefully interact with this character, but I'm pretty sure I maxed out Kawakami. I'm pretty sure I got to the end.
I
Yeah, this is where I take a step back and I say I didn't make this decision, but the character Katsuki Snakugo fell in love, you know? He
You
fell a
son of
little
a
in
bitch.
love.
You son of a bitch. I am pretty close to maxing out hers as well because she's another one where like the abilities that you get from I mean not even one game breaking ability. She has like
3 or 4.
yeah, 3 or 4. I can't yeah. It's at least 3 that are
Yeah.
huge advantages just like to the way you interact with the game. You know, I'll
Mhm.
say this without spoiling anything. You will get more time, which is obviously the most valuable resource in the game. So,
Yeah.
take for that what you will.
I finally experienced one of those benefits, and now I'm like, "Oh, I guess I should have probably talked to her more."
Yeah,
Yeah,
you know,
and
uh
also she tells like the story is very compelling. Like it's a story about coming to terms with it, just being guilty and having guilt and how you cope with being guilty.
Mhm.
And like obviously, me, I obviously said yes when she took the step forward, right? You don't have to do that, but um there's an achievement for it. I'm trying to get the Steam achievement. But what it does is it kind of like again, it's weird, but it kind of like makes it's less to do with, oh yeah, this is your teacher and you're a student. It's more like not like the theme of the social, like not the ending of it. Um, is you're just helping someone get over trauma. And that's something that they have done so well with the Phantom Thieves. But and it's like he's taking what he's learned to other people and trying to help other people. And that's
yeah.
kind of like those are the small subtle moments of what the Phantom Thieves are really about.
I think it's really
Mhm.
funny that Persona 5 even in its oh, here's our like cringy, fucking horny, fan servicey like problematic storyline. Actually, it's also about healing trauma. They're all about healing trauma, just in case you were unaware.
Yeah. So
They know how to fix them
I
all.
mean, it could have been done way worse. It could have been super, super, super corny and kind of just missed the point. But it's a nice, satisfying ending
Even
to
the
a very,
cringiest thing in
very
the game has heart.
exactly. That's it. And hey, if a game's not good, if a game can do that, then I mean, I don't know. I don't know what else to say about it. You know,
So, like I said, it's the JRPG of our time, and we'll leave it at that. So,
the JRPG of our time or the greatest JRPG of our
no, it's
time.
the JRPG. There are no other competitors. So,
Sure.
greatest is implied, you know.
Okay. I
So
like that.
here's where I wanna leave us for today, Zaid. I need you to tell the people where is our next stopping point for episode 4 of the Persona 5 Royal Game Club here on FlipScreen Games.
So you want to get to the end. So at nighttime or the next playable moment on August 22nd. We're about to go through a very crucial arc in the story in terms of just, like what we've been talking about, the theming and the characters of the game, but also, again, it's just one of my favorite parts. We're about to meet someone that just, I'm over the moon excited to get back into it. I might honestly just start playing today.
Oh
Might
yeah.
just get back into it today.
Yeah. This next section is really cool. There's some new characters that we'll meet, and then some evolutions of characters that we already know that are really good stuff, and that I think really deepen the kind of familial energy that we've all been talking about. So I'm excited for that. I'm excited for all of you at home to get to know our new friend in the next chapter here. And I'm excited for all of us to get back together next month for another one of these. So again, to all of you listening at home, if you made it this far, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Persona 5 Royal Book Club. Thank you for your patience for the long delay between episodes. I told you when we published episode 2 that we would hit our deadline for episode 3, and we did. And I'm going to tell you now, we're going to hit it for episode 4, and guess what? We're going to do it. We're going to do it. We're back, baby.
We're going to do it.
We're
Even
back.
with Tears of the Kingdom coming out.
You make a good point, Chuy. We might be a week late. We're going to figure it out. Okay, everybody? But remember, if you guys want to get involved, start playing the game, write in with your thoughts. Let us know about your favorite characters, your favorite palace, how you felt about chapter 3 and beyond. And just come along for the ride. We want to hear you. And I know a lot of you in the Discord have been, Trendy Brenny, you've been showing us some of your personas. Like, people are out there, we're playing, we're chatting. So come join the Discord, come be a part of the conversation. If you need friends to chat Persona 5 with, guess what? Come join our Discord and you will find them. And again, flipscreen.games, that's the link. You can find the Discord, you can find the email, you can find all the places we are all over the web. However you choose to get involved or reach out, we thank you for tuning in for another episode. Before we go, real quick, boys, tell the people where they can find you. Chuy?
Here, basically. Not doing much these days. Twitter, I guess. Chuy plays NTDO on Twitter. That's it.
There you go. Zaid?
You can find me on Twitter at Snackago. There's a 0 instead of an O because somebody has Snackago with an O. This guy's scum. And also, YouTube. I have a video coming out very soon, but until then, you should definitely go check out the latest video I put out on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And just as a teaser, you mentioned Tears of the Kingdom. There might be something coming out just a week before that game comes out that might tide you over one last time before Tears of the Kingdom is out.
There we go.
Check it out May 5th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It'll be there. I hope you enjoy it.
Look at this man dropping release dates for his YouTube videos. He's planning this shit out. Like, wow. All right. I'm here for it. We're ready. We're ready for the next drop. All right. So, again, everybody, thank you for tuning in. For the crew, I've been Pete. He's been Chuy. All the way over there has been Zaid. We'll see you next month. Take your time.